Thank you.
Okay, welcome everyone to our webinar for October. If you can believe that we are already past the midway point of October. We have two speakers today. I will be introducing Dr. Rafael Castillo from Palo Alto College, and then we will also be talking with Juan Ochoa, both who are prolific writers and can share some of their experience in terms of writing and publishing. To introduce Dr. Castillo, Rafael Castillo is a founding faculty member of Palo Alto College who has taught English and humanities there since 1985. He is also the author of 2 short story collections and more than 300 articles, some of which have appeared in the New York Times. Today, he will share his journey as a writer from his early days at St. Mary's University, where he discovered his literary confidence, to his current work as a prolific author and professor. He will also discuss his writing process, his advice for aspiring writers, and his plans for future projects. And so with that, I will hand it over to Dr. Castillo.
Thank you so much, Erin. Thank you, Erin, for that wonderful opportunity. And I also want to thank Dr. Maria Chavez Brovel for being part of this. And she was the one who spearheaded part of the writing group, and for us to have an opportunity for faculty to publish their work. Now, Erin, am I able to share the screen here? Am I able to use the screen? Yes, yes.
You should be able, yes, you should be able to.
So let me, can you see what I have here so far? No?
It is loading. There we go, yes.
Okay, great. I'm gonna open up the PowerPoint. Here it is. It's a little PowerPoint, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to explain some of the features about it. I've been writing now, so that you know, I've been writing since the 7th grade. I know you're wondering, what, 7th grade? Yeah. What happened was back in junior high, we had a little newsletter. It was called the Hawkeye. I went to James Fenimore Cooper Junior High, and some of my friends and I went to start a paper. And that's basically how we started going with this business of writing. From high school, from junior high on, when I went to high school, then I became a news editor of my high school. So it kind of continued again. So it's been very, very enlightening for me to do that. And college level, I started writing, but I didn't join the journalism department of my university because I was majoring in English, and they wanted me to major in communications, and I didn't want to major in communication. I wanted to major in English. So that was the difference. But here's a funny thing. Okay, it's loading already. Can you all see this little handout? Can you see my screen? Yes? Yes?
Yes, we can.
Great, great. I wanted to talk about this particular novel. Let me tell you why. That novel was a big influence in my life, and I read it in the 10th, 11th grade. Actually, I started reading it in 10th grade, then I picked it up again in the 11th grade. And it was something that I wanted to read because I had never heard of this guy. This guy is Dostoevsky. And at the time, there weren't not that many Latino writers, right? And the only ones were Juan Rufo and a lot of the Mexican writers from Mexico. And of course, Miguel Cervantes, who everybody knows who he is. But something that is more close to the community didn't exist. It didn't exist for me. So the writers that we were being open to were basically people from other cultures. But this guy, this Dostoevsky writer, he kind of resonated with me for the simple reason that I began to understand what he was trying to do. And to me, I really felt a kinship with him because he covered, even though the names were all in Russian, he covered a lot of what we would see in the barrio. So let me begin by giving you, this is where I was born. Actually, I was born in a hospital, but I was raised here in a funeral home. And the funeral home, we used to call it the fun home, because you just take the word funeral out and it becomes fun. And on top was my residence. Way at the top, and at the bottom were offices in a small chapel. This was, I would say, late 50s, early 60s. By then, by the late 60s, it was already in disuse. So, and one of the things I remember reading is that from writers that I read was suffering. It says suffering is the key to knowledge. And I kind of believe that, because when you suffer a lot, you have to find ways to alleviate that suffering. And sometimes ideas, hard work, all this will come into play. So let me tell you, what is a good upbringing for a writer? An unhappy childhood. That's not my own. That's Ernest Hemingway. He said, all writers, you know, they start because they have something they want to get off their chest. They want to write about something because it's something that's bothering them. And for me, my neighborhood was my world. My neighborhood was my world. And that was everything. I could explore the world around my neighborhood and see differences. So for me, imagination is the most essential thing to becoming an explorer of neighborhood. You get a chance to go to different areas and you get a chance to explore. So why read such a book in the first place? Why read such a book in the first place? Well, like I said, I was growing up without authors of cultural identification. The only famous writer that I ever met, and he became a very, very good friend of mine, he passed away, God rest his peace, is Rodolfo Anaya, the author of Bless Me Ultima. And I didn't meet him until the 70s, late 70s. He published his book in 1972, Bless Me Ultima. And it kind of took the world by storm, especially in barrios. It had to do with raza, with, you know, Mexican Americans and their interplay with society. So for me, Rudy did not exist yet. So that's why I was reading this Russian writer named Dostoevsky. Reading to me, was always been like a liberation. It's an exercise that kept me, helped me achieve some freedom. It kept me also, it helped me out because it kept me away from boredom. It kept boredom at bay. And like I said, reading Rudy Anaya's novel, because he's a good friend of mine who passed away, was really experimental also. So here's another thing. I was not the only one in my circle of friends who read, because we developed ideas in our own space. And even up to now, those same friends that I cultivated in junior high, even now, they are themselves writers in their own way. The most famous, of course, who does a lot of books on Chicano history, is Ignacio S. Garcia. And he's been on PBS, but he writes a lot of historical material. And he's always telling me, I want to write my short stories, I want to write my novel. So we're in the process of exchanging a lot of information right now. The other two are Danny Hernandez, who published a novel through Random House. And then the other one, they all went to school with me. And the other one, of course, is Roger Martinez. And Roger also has published his own books. Yeah. So these are circle of friends that we've been together for over 35 years, more than 35, 40 years, because we've been part of the writing process. So during high school, like I said, I was recruited to write about stories of our school. And that's a great thing to do, to write stories about the school, what's happening in school. Okay, do the next one, hold on. Next slide. There you go. Reading and writing about comic books. Everyone, when you start reading, comic books are very important because that's what kids want to read, comic books. So graphic novels didn't exist back then. They were just slowly coming into fruition. a lot of comic books, of course, they were a powerhouse. So at the time, I still read a lot of DC comic books and imitated the words on paper. You know, I'd copy them. I'd get some papers from the grocery store, the bags, not the plastic bags, the paper bags. We cut them up. We use crayons, and we'll create our own little stories in there. And that's part of me growing up in elementary school. So that's why writing, reading has been part of my life since the very beginning. But it can be developed by anyone. So I was reading Superman, the Hulk, Fantastic Four, all these people, and now they make movies into them. But it was while I was in high school, mind you, that I discovered the Russian novelists. And that book that was just recently published by Peter Lang, it's a collection of essays called Dostoevsky on Guadalupe Street. Let me go to the next slide. So this is the book I read. This is the new edition, but I read the McAndrews edition, which is done in 1964, and then I had also read Constant Garnet. It's strange we're talking about Constant Garnet. I wrote a little answer to a column for the New Yorker about Dostoevsky, because I think it really speaks to a lot of people. And people that I've encountered who've read this book always tell me the same thing. They said, you know what? This book is so strange because it really grabs your heart. And it does. It really grabs your heart. And it's not read anymore too much. I've only used it one time when I taught AP English. And the students themselves told me, man, this is a fantastic book. So it is good. Let me tell you. So how can one novel transform your life and make you a better writer? As I said before, I began reading Fyodor Dostoevsky, The Brothers Karamazov, in high school. And it was not assigned to me at all. I just accidentally stumbled into it. And the place I found it, of all places, right on Guadalupe Street, it was a botica. Boticas, they're drugstores, like botanicas. And Fernandez Botica, the guy had, an old guy, he had comics, old novels, candies, herbs, and the place was located on Guadalupe Street on the west side of San Antonio. So I saw the book and I placed it back, and Mr. Fernandez, he told me, you like that book? I see you pick it up. Go ahead and take it with you. He says, have you read it? And he says, yeah, I read it. I read it when I was in the 11th grade. That's what the man told me. And I said, well, what's it about? He said, I'm not going to tell you what it's about. You have to read it. And it was a thick novel. It's close to 700 pages. So here I am, bored, because we only had one TV at home, And I lived with my grandparents. I didn't live with my parents. My parents were divorced. So I lived with my grandparents, and they loved to watch TV. You know, they were watching the novelas, La Leona, all these little all-star wrestling. And so what I would do is just go into another room and just start reading. And that took the time away. Or go outside and play, or, you know, go call my friends. But usually this was late at night. And I would start reading a chapter at a time. It's a very, very thick book. And let me tell you what drew me into it. Let me give you the next slide so you can see. It's the brothers. There were actually 3 brothers, and then almost halfway into the book, I discovered there was another brother, and that was weird. So these 3 brothers, Dmitri, Alyosha, Ivan, and Smerdyakov, he was the rejected one. He was the rejected, and there was no mother. It was all boys, and the father, old man Karamazov, the guy was an absolute dictator. It was his way or the highway. So it reminded me a lot of some of the stuff that was going on in our neighborhood. A lot of the same stuff. I could identify with these people. And the 3 brothers are at the center, along with an irresponsible father who's drunk all the time. The guy's it's an absolute drunk. He would come in, chastise the boys, cuss them out and all this. So you kind of wonder, like, wow, what's going on here? How did this guy, kind of capture stuff that I would see around the neighborhood? And that's what drew me in immediately. This old man, Karamazov. Let me continue. So here are the main points of the brothers. And the reason I'm bringing this up because that book that Maria gave me, the blurb, it's the lead essay to a collection of essays. They're not stories, they're essays. And I use that as the main front of the book because it was a very powerful book that kind of motivated me into writing, a lot of writing. So there's some of the characterization of the family tree because the old man, Fyodor, is characterized by two marriages. The guy was married twice. The first marriage produced the two brothers, Dmitri and then Ivan. And then finally, Alyosha. That would be the second one. So the first marriage is Dmitri. The second one is Ivan and Alyosha. And then they have 3 kids. But then there's another one in between. And it's kind of like in some families, you know, sometimes they're families with, you know, you got the brothers and you get, well, here's another one. Well, where did this guy come from? And usually as kids, you don't ask. That's just the way it is. They share this certain characteristics of the main author himself. Now, Dmitri, he's very sincere. When he talks, he's very generous and he's very courageous. Ivan, he's the thinker. He's a thinker in the family. He's very prideful and he thinks a lot. He overthinks a lot. And it reminded me of this kid in our neighborhood. Everyone used to call Foco, light bulb. Because the guy was always thinking. We used to call him Foco. He was always thinking, analyzing. Why are we doing this? Why is this happening? This Columbus discovered America. How did he discover it? People are here already. Things like that. He was always asking questions. And they made us think. We start asking questions. And then the last one, Alyosha. It's something a bit different, though. He is the Christ figure of the story and the one that the author, Dostoevsky, calls the hero from the very first page. But, you know, I said to myself, he's the hero. Why is he so, you know, why is this other guy doing more work? But let me continue. I think it's essential to try to read the Brothers Karamazov as a Alyosha story. That's true. But you can move into, you can look at the other characters because the guy opens up, the author opens up all the characters so you can slowly identify with them. And that's what I've liked about the book. Next one. Now, Fyodor Karamazov, the father, the guy is essentialist. And essentialist means it's not a bad thing. He likes everything that's sensual, everything like good wine, good food, likes to party. But he's written as a very despicable character. We know that he's going to die from page 1. I mean, you could feel it whenever something bad's going to happen to this guy. And there are probably times when we read about his behavior and start to hope that his death will come very soon because he's just like that. He's kind of selfish and evil. Everything has to be his way. Everything has to be his way. And he punishes the boys. He's always punishing the boys, always. And that's one of the things I kind of saw that. I saw a lot of people in the barrio like that. And I used to talk to this friend of mine who would always come with like a black eye, say, hey, what happened? He said, oh, my father came in drunk, was in a bad mood, is trying to hit my mom. And I kind of intervene. And said, man. So I'm listening to all these things that are happening. So the book kind of speaks to that. The second one, there's only one word that Dostoevsky uses to describe this guy. He calls him a buffoon. See that word there, buffoon? Kind of like a silly man. Like even though he's angry, he's evil, there's something silly about him. Because when he starts drinking, he starts acting kind of like crazy. There seems to me something in contrast with Fyodor because he's an exact opposite of Alyosha. Alyosha is all good. And when I think of Alyosha, I think of my younger brother who wanted to be a priest. He was always the peacemaker in the family. Whenever there was a big argument, he would, whoa, hey, wait a minute, hey, let's all love one another. He was always the peacemaker, always the peacemaker. And there are times that what he went through with my dad as a peacemaker, we saw a lot of differences. There's a lot of differences because I was raised by my grandparents. I wasn't raised by my father. So my grandparents were kind of like the role models. So when I read this book, I kind of saw a lot of different things in myself. That's why I kind of identified with the book. Fyodor is almost unbelievably despicable. And this is not to mention any irredeeming qualities in the book that I can remember. But I think there's something also evolutionary about the old man, because the oldest son kind of has the same characteristics. So you start looking at him. This is Dmitri. So he wants to be like a wannabe centralist. And Dmitri's upbringing was not exactly stable. His mother left him. His father forgets he even exists. And his mother's cousins take a stab at raising him. And some distant relatives of his mother tried to raise him, and it turns out well. So we'll see how it turns out. And when we encounter him in this action, he's trying to settle a dispute with his father over the portion of the estate that he's entitled to. He said they owe him money because when his mom died, hey, money was left to him, he wants to collect. But the father says, no, I'm the one that decides who collects that money. And they get into an argument. No, that money belongs to me because mother is explicitly told you in a decree that that money was for me. They had a little statement. But the old man doesn't want to give it up. Says, no, we're not going to give you 2,000 rubles. What's wrong with you? Crazy? So there's an argument there between father and son. And usually arguments are over money all the time. There's always family arguments are over money. Why is this kid here? Why are we feeding him? He's drawing food from our table. Things like that, especially kids that are adopted by other families. All right, let me continue. Ayosha, that's the younger brother, and he is the one that's most Christ-like. He is the one that's very forgiving, very loving, and he's always trying to help the father understand, hey, you're drinking too much. Why are you doing that to your own sons? You know, he asked him, and of course the father kind of likes him a lot. Even though he's drunk sometimes, he holds him. He hugs him, and he said, I will try to do better. Ayosha, you're my conscience. I will try to do better. But then the bottle, he gets to drinking, and he starts all over again being the same type of person. So Ayosha is described like a lover of mankind, and he's loved by everyone. Dostoevsky defends Ayosha, saying that he's a complete faith in people, but it is not as naive as people suspect. What might it be a problem for Dostoevsky is that the reader started to see Ayosha as innocent. I mean, he is innocent, but there's another side of him, a human side, that he knows that there are problems out there in the world. And he's kind, he's sensitive, he's understanding, and he loves his brothers, and he wants to be a priest. So almost a third into the novel, when he's talking to the people at the monastery, it's the main guy in the monastery who tells him, there are things that you have to do. You cannot be a priest now. We're not going to accept you now. You need to go back to your family and settle problems. He said, well, what problems are those? You will find out when you see them. And then that priest, his name is Father Sozima, he kneels down on it. And Ayosha kind of freaks out, like, wow, I'm not holy. What am I supposed to do? And that's another thing that the story gives. And as I'm reading, I'm wondering, oh my God, what is this guy supposed to do? I got to find out. So I start reading, and it gives him more information. Ivan, the thinker, of all the brothers, Ivan comes closest to the doubter of the family, because he overthinks religions. He categorizes religion as some form of cosmic conscience, you know. And even though you might call him an atheist, he's an agnostic. He wants to believe. He wants to believe. Embedded in that novel is a little story called The Grand Inquisitor. The Grand Inquisitor. And it's a very, very powerful story. And it's the story that Ivan writes. He writes it and he includes it into the novel. So when I read it, and I read that, The Grand Inquisitor, it kind of can be read by itself. And I'm going to be very open about it. I used that idea in one of my stories that I published. It was anthologized, and it's called The Penitent of Guadalupe Street. And in that story, I kind of did like a take on the Grand Inquisitor, because I was influenced by this story about how Christ returns, and then we have an argument with Christ. You got this Grand Inquisitor who starts questioning him, asking a lot of questions, doubting. So that's one of the things about Ivan that's strange. All right, let me continue. So this guy is the thinker. He's the thinker. This is the last of the brothers, and this is the one that is very surprising because no one knew he was there. So you got three brothers, and then all of a sudden you've got the illegitimate son. And that really, really resonated with me, because in my walks around the neighborhood and talking to people, there's always the son who really is from out of wedlock, but he's included with the rest of the group. So he introduces Smerdyakov, and calls him, the character does, the born of the devil's son and a righteous woman. And it's sad because the way he was born is sad. Every neighborhood has characters. They kind of like, characters that kind of roam the neighborhood. And there was this woman that roamed our neighborhood, and no one knew where she was, where she kept, or what. And a lot of the kids would kind of taunt her. They used to call her Road Runner because she had little tennis shoes and she would walk real fast. And the kids tried to outrun her, but they couldn't. And she would go straight to church and pray and then leave. So these are all characters from the neighborhood. And there was another character who rode a bike around, and he had 7 spoons. He always carried 7 spoons in his satchel. Kind of wonder, 7 spoons, what does that mean? And everyone called him Siete Cucharas, you know. So I got a story about him, kind of like a fairy tale. But getting back to Smerdyakov, he is closest to the father. Why? Because the old man doesn't treat him as a son. He treats him as a servant. He becomes a servant in the house. He says, you were born here. You're not my son. You are my servant. You were given to me by God. That's all he says. And it's sad because that kid, he wants identity with the father. He wants to be part, and he's the one that's also second closest to the old man of the novel, Old Man Karamazov. But the problem is that pushing away of that kid causes anger. See that? He harbors an anger toward his father, but he fears God's wrath because the old man that raises him, the old man that raises him, always tells him, not old man Karamazov, Gregory, the servant. He raises him. He said, look, I want you to raise this kid. He said, all right. He was born here in the backyard. The kid was born in the backyard. Unfortunately, the woman, his mother, died at childbirth. But the problem with the mother is she was kind of like that woman that ran around our neighborhood that nobody understood what she went. She was kind of like mentally challenged. So the mother was mentally challenged, and no one knows what happened, how she got pregnant. And then boom, the mother, the woman, goes to the house of Karamazov to give birth. So what does that tell you who the father is? It's implied. The father of that boy is old man Karamazov. It's always implied in there because he never admits it. This is not my son. And let me continue. What happens here is that it's the bastard son, the illegitimate child, that kills the father with a pickaxe. One day, the father's drunk. Guy walks in, and he knows there's no one around. He grabs a pickaxe and he hits him right in the head. And then Smerdyakov, he faints because he has epilepsy. and he goes into a trauma. So no one knows who killed the father. So the only possible person that had any anger toward the father is Dimitri. So half of the thing is trying to find this guy innocent, because every evidence points to Dimitri. Even though he didn't do it, he hated his father, he wanted to kill his father, but he didn't do it. And the whole process of the novel is unwrapping all these strands of evidence that go into that little thing, that field. All right, so here, the power of fiction and the power of poetry to strengthen the heart and to uplift the mind. CTN students can learn much from reading great literature. The works of Juan Rulfo, Maria Amparo Ruiz, Ángela de Hoyos, and of course, Gabriel Garcia Marquez. Forgot to put Garcia, Gabriel. 100 Years of Solitude, I'm using it this semester. I'm using it actually next semester. I'm using 100 Years of Solitude because I think it's a wonderful story where students can get a lot of ideas from every chapter. You can kind of like every chapter you could write a story from another perspective. Every chapter kind of opens up like that. And it's one of the most powerful novels that I have ever read, besides The Brothers Karamazov. And continue. So writing is a vocation. It's not a major. A lot of people tell me, sir, I want to be a writer. Do I major in English? It doesn't. English is okay, but you don't need a major. You just need to read a lot. You just need to be able to not be afraid of writing. So often students ask me, how can I become a writer? And a couple of years ago, I taught a creative writing class with 10 students. And from that batch, I had 4 great writers, and I have one of them that I attended this book signing at Barnes and Nobles. Very, very good writer. And he was awarded this past year, Alumni Award. The guy's written 3 books. He's an Iraqi veteran. And I always tell him, write about what happened in Iraq. He said, I can't, I'm too close. I'm too close to it. And I said, well, one of these days as you get older, maybe you'll have that distance and you'll be able to write about it. And they always say, so what should we read? Read comic books, poems. Read, start slow, and then savor the words. Look at the words. Look how the words are written. And then the next thing I tell them is write in your journal, but write often and be fearless about words, about sentences, about paragraphs. And another thing is be yourself. A lot of great writers, they were asked, how did you do it? They asked Hemingway. He said, well, I copied the greats. And he had a bad thing to say about Dostoevsky, my favorite writer. I memorized his quote. He said, they asked him, did you read Dostoevsky? He said, of course I read Dostoevsky. Who's not going to read? He's a good influence. So what do you have to say about him? He says, how can a man write so badly yet influence you so deeply? And I kind of agree with him. You know, the writing's kind of stilted. But it's a translation. It's a translation from Russian. I can't read Russian. I read it in English. And I got friends who read it in Spanish. So Hemingway doesn't understand that these are translations. It's another novel in itself. And I kind of agree. How can someone write so badly but influence you so deeply? And that's one of the things about Dostoevsky. If you cannot think of words, I would say draw pictures. Think of what you see. I always tell students, when you draw pictures, that's what you're doing when you're writing description. You're drawing pictures. You're always drawing pictures. And the next 2 are use sensory description. Words that make you smell it. You know, you smell it, you feel it, you feel it, you touch it, and you hear it. All these elements should be in a lot of creative writing, a lot of writing that's out there. For essay writing, basically, it's more less passive and more active. Less passive and more active. When Aaron introduced me about the 300 articles, let me be open with you so that you know, some of those articles were syndicated. They were syndicated because I started with the Washington Post group, Hispanic Link, back in the 80s. So they ran like 10 or 12 of my articles. So when they run your articles, they tell you this article is going to run in 12, 13 newspapers. Oh, okay. So 12. See, so you got 12 articles and 13 newspapers. You can duplicate them. It goes very, very fast. And the others were done through AP, Associated Press. So what they do is they'll take the pieces and they run them all over different newspapers, and they'll tell you what newspapers they'll pick them up. And then the other one, of course, is the Hearst Foundation, because I do a lot of work for them too. And that's why the advice I give. Right now, I tell people, do not give up. Please do not give up. A lot of people give up. And right now is the time of the year 2010, 2020. It was a very good year because it opened up the doors to what is called the independent author. And I think that's very important. And let me tell you who an independent author is right now, who is the most famous of all the independent authors. And that is a woman by the name of Rupi Kaur. She's a Punjab Canadian poet, self-published. Guess how many books she sold? 3.5 million copies worldwide and translated into 25 languages. What happened with Rupi is nobody wanted to publish her. They said, no one's going to read this junk, kind of like that. So she decided to do it herself. And it's weird because Penguin Press asked her that they wanted to publish her material. And she kind of told them, well, thank you very much, but I want all the profits to come one way. And that's one of the things I tell students. There are two options available. The self-publish, which was frowned upon 20 years ago. And that was frowned upon. They call it vanity publishing. Nobody wanted to do that. Now, ironically, it's all the rage. Anybody with a computer can set up their own press. So that became very, very different. But I'll tell you a little secret after we finish. So she sold 3.5 million copies. The reason I found out about her because my daughter wanted to read some poems that I never heard of this. Why don't you do some of the poetry of so and so? No, I want this poem. I said, all right, let me go get it for you. So I went to Barnes and Nobles and I asked the lady, do you have a copy of so and so? And the woman looked at me. Yes, you have to go to the front. They're all over there. So I followed her to the front, to the checkout. And I said, why do you all have them hidden? And she laughed and said, well, they're not hidden, sir, is that a lot of the kids buy these books. So we keep 40, 50 copies a week and it's sold real quick. And they're poems. And I said, wow. And then he asked me, well, how old is your daughter? She's 16. She was 16 then. I said, yeah, it's appropriate. So I bought it for her and she read it and I was very curious about the read. They're they're like aphorisms. They're real short, but they're very beautiful. They really tug at your heartstrings. And they're unlike traditional poetry. They got a lot of tumbling metaphors and a lot of references to things that deal with the heart. And that really translated well. So these are the things. And one of the things I want to mention before I stop and we can do Q&A is that what writers will never tell you, especially the published writers, is that every book you read, especially from the big houses like Random House, Penguin, Viking, all those. If you look at the back page, because I was looking at a book I'm going to use next semester called We the Animals by Justin Torres. It's a very, very good book. And it's very short. It's 115 pages. And when you go to the back of the book, on the acknowledgements, he has like 15 names he thanks. Oh, I want to thank so-and-so, I want to thank them. So here's the thing. All writers, including Stephen King, have editors. That's the secret. They all have editors. When they get their book, it goes to a vetting process. And the vetting process, it goes to a content editor, a line editor, grammar editor, house editor. It goes through a lot. So a lot of people put their hands in it. So by the time you get it, you begin to see it, and you find out that they move paragraphs around. And sometimes they'll work with you, but if they don't have time, they're not going to help. They'll just say, look, this is a contract. We have first rights on this. This is where we're changing, and this is your draft, and these are the galleys. And go with us together, and then you can start talking. Well, what happened here? And they'll say, well, too passive. We need to change it. Oh, what happened? Let me tell you of a person who was awarded $50,000 for his first novel, and he gave it back. He gave it back. It was all over in the New York Times. And this person, he's dyslexic, and it took him a long time to write the book. It's a very well-written book. And then he said, when I finally saw the finished product, how it was supposed to, that I had to sign off on it, I just couldn't. They moved things around. And I said, this is not my writing. Well, what is this? You took all the words that I had, you moved this, you moved that. And what he didn't understand, that's part of the vetting and editing process. And it goes with you down the line. Now, I'm not talking about poetry. I'm talking about fiction. I'm talking about fiction, long paragraphs. And I'll never forget, he decided, he gave the money back, and then another company published it, and they kept exactly the way he wanted it. And when I read it, you could tell it was overwritten. You understand? You could tell, like, man, this paragraph you could cut here. So that's what editors do. They cut things. They rearrange things. So it's nothing against you. They're just trying to perfect your writing. And their name doesn't go in there. Their name doesn't say, this is by Rain of Gold by so on. That's the name of the book, Rain of Gold. Okay. And it's by so-and-so with help from 6 different editors. It's not going to have that. It's just going to have his name. That's all it's going to have. Another person who did it, of course, and everybody knows that because it's just a fact. She published her, excuse me, she published her first book with a Latino press called Arte Público Press. Then after she finished Arte Público, she wanted a wider audience. So Random House took her and started changing things. But that's what they do. They change things. So that's one of the secrets that a lot of people don't understand, that all writing goes through this type of editing process. It's unavoidable. I'm going to stop sharing and give it back to you. Is that okay, Erin?
Yes, that's great. Thank you.
Oh, no, thank you. I hope I didn't talk too much. I've got this nasty cough.
No, don't worry. Thank you for powering through. We appreciate it.
Okay.
Juan, are you able to hear us now?
You're on mute.
Unmute.
Oh,
Yeah.
there you are. Hello, Juan.
Yeah, I can hear you guys now. I was having trouble from my office, so I had to come home and do things, and log on and everything, and it took me a little bit, but yeah, I'm here. Thank you.
Oh my gosh, no, thank you. So I want to go ahead and introduce Juan so that he can share his remarks. Mr. Juan Ochoa teaches freshman English at South Texas College. He's also the author of Marihuano y Pal Otro Lado, and Other Tales of Bad Hombres and Nasty Women, the first 2 parts of a trilogy that concludes with the upcoming novel El Final.
Yeah.
Yes. So please, Juan, take it away. Thank you.
Yeah, well, by the way, Mr. Castillo, I found your presentation very interesting, very enlightening, and yeah, I agree with a lot that you say. When I couldn't hear and I was in my office, I noticed that cultural relevance was really hard. When I grew up, when I was growing up and I was reading in school, I never had any Hispanic authors. And if they did direct us to anything that was written, it was Cervantes. It was Don Quixote. right? That's true. And that's pretty tough,
Yeah.
right? For a Pocho kid to read in Castilian and, so, that was a complete turnoff. That was like, it wasn't Spanish, it wasn't Mexican, it wasn't, Spanglish, it was Greek to me, it was like, I don't know what's going on here. And as I was going through my high school years, I found that it was very difficult to get any kind of information about going to college, right? They would steer us all to vocational schools, and they would tell me, don't you want to be a plumber? Wouldn't you like to drive a big truck? And I was like, no, I don't want to do anything like that. I want to work in the air conditioning like you. I want to, be clean all day like you. But of course that wasn't an option. So the only way that I could continue my academic career was to move to Mexico, where my father wielded great influence because, well, my father was, he was a plaza boss. He ran a town. He in the underworld speak of and so I studied law in Mexico, and that's when I started reading Mexican authors, and I started learning. It was I remember Muhammad Ali and Richard Pryor in the 70s went to Africa, and they were very amazed to see Black people running a government, and there was no racial slurs directed at them, and that they were that they were people. And the experience to me in Mexico was much the same, because I would go and I would talk to my father's compadres and his cronies, and I would tell them, don't you want to live in America? And they would say, no. Why? This is great here, and it instilled in me a great sense of pride. And while I was studying law, I found myself in the need to learn how to type, right? Because we didn't have computers back then or anything, we had to type. And I thought that a great way to learn how to type would be to write a book. And I would tell my friends, I want to write a book, I want to write a book, I want to write a book. And of course, they would all say, you're crazy. You can't even speak Spanish. So let's write in Spanish. Let's say, well, no, I can write in English, right? And they're like, well, who's going to read it? You're a Mexican. And that was kind of discouraging for a while. And I really didn't know what the writing process was. I really didn't know how to go about it. But I knew that I had stories in me, and I grew up with a family of storytellers, and I'm going to read my acknowledgement page to you. Just a second, let me get my glasses. And because I found it interesting right now what Mr. Castillo was saying about people putting down 15 names for their acknowledgements. I say this: I would like to give special thanks to my family, my parents, grandparents, aunts, uncles, cousins, siblings, and all the strayed, broken, and travel-weary people who came into our lives for the ability to tell a story. I can remember countless hours of sitting quietly in the kitchen pretending to eat, or in the living room pretending to watch TV, while the grown-ups talked in hushed tones and whispered gasps of astonishment about things that should not have been known and that should never be repeated. I used to linger about trying to go unnoticed while the elders of our clan laid out our family's darkest secrets until I blurted out, "But why?" I would then get yelled at and ordered out of the room, with mom saying, "You're always hearing things you shouldn't, and then you can't just be quiet. You have to say something." My father would ask, sometimes with pride, but oftentimes with resentment, "Why are you always interested in these things that happen to us?" They were all great storytellers who were blessed with a special ability to recognize significance. From my family, I learned why stories are told when they shouldn't be. For this, I will always be grateful. And I believe that for many of us, that's all we have is our oral histories. right? And what I did for this book is I went back 4 or 5 generations back to my great grandmother, who was shot off her horse for being a witch. Um, and I try to narrate all the pivotal stories that I feel were the incentive for us to flee northern Mexico and come to the United States, right? And the thing about my writing is I try to tell the story the way I imagined it, because most of the times I would have a sentence, I would have a phrase, I would have a little scene that they would that I would overhear, that I would, and the rest I had to piece together, right? And sometimes these stories came from several people. Sometimes, like I said, they were a line or a sound or you know, a passing comment, right? And I would have to fill in the rest of the blanks. But what I do realize about all this is that it's all about identity. It's all about and you know, I wanted my wife passed away going on 5 years now, and I really wanted, well, it got to me thinking about my own mortality, of course, and I really wanted my children to understand, you know, why we live the way we do, and you know, certain things are just different in my household, and it's because of our background. It's you know, about the traumas and the hurt and the frustrations and the oppression that have been passed down from generation to generation. And when the book was sent out to readers and to people that to blurb it, and they all came to the same conclusion that I did. You know, that, you know, this is a family that's realizing you just can't win. You know, you're you know, and they're just, you know, trying their best to survive. And I think that a lot of our community is faced with the same challenges and the same frustrations. And I know that there's got to be more people out there like me that are, you know, constantly wondering, but why? Why did this happen? Right? As far as the writing process, the best advice that I can share with anybody who wants to sit down to write is think about it. Think about it long and hard, right? First of all, you're joining a very tough gang, right? And believe you me, I've been in tough gangs before, and this is the toughest, right? You write something down and you're sticking your neck out, you know, just waiting for somebody to come and chop it off, right? To begin with. My first novel is over a couple of 100 pages, and most comments are, did you know that on page 43 you have a word that it's misspelled or out of place or something like that? I'm like, yeah, but there's, you know, 209 pages that are not like that. Right? But yes, you're going to get criticized. And the first novel, I was successful at alienating half my family. With the second one, I'm pretty sure the rest is going to disown me. And we'll take it from there. I still have my surrogate family with the Ascender program, and, you know, everybody at work and stuff like that who have not abandoned me and have, you know, quite the contrary, have embraced my efforts, and that, you know, that's always encouraging. But if you really want to start to write, like I said, think about it. And if you're sitting there staring at a blank screen, wondering, what should I write? You need to get away from that screen and go think about it some more, right? I don't write in a routine. Like, I know a lot of my fellow writers will dedicate a couple of hours every day. I know Daniel Chacon, who's a good friend of mine. He won't take any calls. He won't check any emails or anything until after 11 a.m. right? Because he'll spend the whole morning writing. That's his writing time. I can't do that. I kind of have to write in spurts. But 24/7, I have the hamster wheel going, and I'm thinking and I'm thinking and I'm wondering. And usually what it takes for me is I've got the first line and I've got the last line. And I write down the first line and I have in my mind where I want the story to end. And then it's just a question of connecting the dots, right? And like I said, I come from a family of storytellers, right? And for some reason or another, we all were able to grasp the concept of beginning, middle, and end without any kind of formal instruction, right? I know that William Carlos Williams used to say that he didn't know what it was about a story, but that it had to have it. And if you asked him what it was, he couldn't tell you, right? But he could recognize it, and I feel that about the stories that I try to narrate, that I try to reproduce from what I heard growing up. They all had an it. They all had there was a lesson at the end. There was a something, right? Like I say, there was something significant in there that made me think. And I think that more people who look like me wonder how they could do this, right? And I don't think that there's too many people walking up to them and saying, look, do it like this, or try this, I think quite the contrary. I grew up in a traditional Mexican family, and I do mean Mexican, even though we're all born in the United States. My father never let us call ourselves Chicano or Hispanic or Latino. We were Mexican, and that was it. And like I said, I grew up in the most staunch of traditions. Whenever you said I want to do this, that the answer was "Hey, te lo sigo." Right? Like, just shut your face, right? You're not going to do anything. You're going to do what you're told, when you're told, how you're told, and that's it. And especially these stories, they're all these taboo things that you shouldn't talk about. That don't say anything. Don't But yet, every time the grown-ups would get together, that's all they would talk about, right? So I knew it was important, and I think that it's that. I think the levels of narration call for us to call on all our personal experience, on all our direct and indirect knowledge of things, and to purge those things from our minds, from our, not in the sense that we want to get rid of them and for them to go away forever, but in the sense that we want to put those things on paper so they don't come back and haunt us anymore. I hope that's understandable, right? Because my first book is really growing up with my father, who was the head, was a career criminal, and I get blackballed a lot from the Hispanic writing community because I'm accused of glorifying the drug trade and everything. I always tell everybody, if you're interested in going into the drug trade after reading my book, then there's something really wrong with you, because this is far from a glorification. This is a very raw and candid look at something that none of us should be doing, right? Because there's no good retirement plan for this. So I wrote the first book in first person narrative, and because that's how I witnessed it. And the second book, I tried to tell it the way I heard the stories, right? And so we have an omniscient narrator, going on there. And like I said, I think that anybody who wants to start off writing, the best thing that they can do is, think about it. And once they've thought about it for a while, write, fill up the page, get something on there. get it wrote. Then after you've gotten, some pages down, you can go back and get it right and, do the editing. And I was very phobic about writing because my grammar sucked and I didn't know where the commas went and the editing and everything like that. But then I found, there's the CLE, they'll proofread for you and they'll tell you, and even anybody who can read will read it and they'll look at you and say, this doesn't sound right, or I don't understand what you mean there. And that's enough. And you can go back and fix it. And like all things, the more you do it, the easier it becomes, or at least the more comfortable you become with it, right? Because I remember when I first started writing, I felt like I was writing with somebody looking over my shoulder at all times, right? And that's a pretty scary feeling. But the more I do it, the less inhibited I feel, and yeah, it's caused a little bit of tensions in my family, and not everybody's speaking to me, but you make a cake, you got to break some eggs. So what can I tell you? I don't know what else you would like me to share with you, but that's, I've seen that we're getting up to 4 o'clock, and that's pretty much it in a nutshell.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I feel like the the overall comments from both you and Rafael are very much about the importance of seeing ourselves reflected in writing, and but also being able to draw from Rafael talked about comic books, about our own experiences, that blend of creativity, and then also that writing is hard, but it is also an extremely worthwhile venture. So
Yeah,
go ahead.
artists and athletes, they play a role, they play a position of sport. Writers work. You never hear a writer say, I'm playing on a story. I'm working on a story. I'm working on an essay. Yeah, it's work.
Yeah. I wanted to see if anybody had any questions or comments for our speakers.
Well, I wanted to say that it's very rewarding to be able to see two of our faculty, share their work as authors. We oftentimes look for people that do that kind of work, but to have our own whose work we can share with our students and create some lesson plans from them is it's wonderful. And I think it's very important to share your works with them. I thought it was funny that Rafael said to be a writer, you have to have had a terrible childhood.
Yeah, that helps.
And that's one of the things that both of you had going there. And a little different, but, is very significant. A very significant point, because many of our students are going through a lot of different types of hardship, and many of our students at the border have families similar to yours, and they need to be able to cope in both worlds. And sometimes when they're able to read stories that resonate with them, whether they're autobiographical or fiction, it kind of helps them process that. And like with the stories in Rafael's writing, each one of those brothers had some characteristic that we could identify with.
Yes.
And those stories kind of serve as prompts for our students to begin to analyze, themselves. So I think they play a significant role in self-discovery. So I hope that we're able to continue the conversation, maybe in a seminar or maybe a panel in the future, and do highlight our the writers within our group, because we have another one that also has published books. So I think it's wonderful to see this community coming together. So I just want to say thank you to both of you.
Thank you.
Maria? Hello,
Sí,
Maria.
Rafa.
Yes,
Uh-huh.
I've got some books that I'm always recommending for
Okay.
readers, and let me give them to you. A couple of years ago, there's a novel by Hernan Diaz called Trust. It won the Pulitzer Prize. It's very well done. I mean, I read it and I highlighted it. And a Mexican writer who died, who passed away, was Roberto Bolano. And he published a trilogy of books, and the one that I really resonates a lot is Savage Detectives, and it takes place in Mexico City in all the bookstores. And what I like about it is right now, as we speak, there are a group of kids. They're putting out a journal called Interrelista Review, and it's taken from that novel. So these are kids from other colleges,
Mhm.
and then the other one is a book called The Queen of Filth. And it's about a Chicana vampire. A Chicana magic for Halloween. It's by a woman named Vil Campos. And she lived in San Antonio, but now she moved to England. And she's writing a lot of these, the vampire books. They're fan fiction. I don't like them too much, but I read them just so I can see what they're doing. And of course, the real famous one that won like 15,000 awards, that book called We the Animals by Justin Torres. Very well done. And speaking as a fiction writer myself, but more as an editor, because I've edited magazines. Maria, I've edited magazines in Arizona, New Mexico, all over the place. And I'm always feel great when I discover new writers and what they're doing. Just thought I'd
Excellent.
give you those books.
Thank you. Thank you, Rafa. It was the Queen of what?
The Queen of Filth.
Oh, film.
Yeah,
Okay.
no, filth, como costra, filth. No,
Okay.
Filth, yeah.
Okay.
it's
Yeah.
by V. Campos.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah, that's really helpful. Wonderful.
I'm also reading a lot of Black writers because I like to read a lot of our African American community.
Good. Well, next time we have a session with you guys,
Mhm.
bring them along. I've been trying to get him to do a little anthology for us. So maybe that would be a group project that we can work on. So that'd be wonderful. Thank you. Yes.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for attending. I wanted to shout out Rafael, who I know hasn't been feeling well this week and was able to be here, and then Juan, who was able to come and talk on rather short notice. Absolutely, yes. Juan, if you'd like to shout out your book really fast that you were just holding up, please take this opportunity.
It's Para Otro Lado. It just dropped on the 17th from Madville Press out of Lake Dallas here in Texas. You can get it on Amazon, the Texas Book Consortium, Madville Press. Hopefully in your bookstores, right? You can ask them to order it. And here it is. I added and other tales of bad hombres and nasty women because Trump said that when he was coming down the escalator that there were a bunch of bad hombres and nasty women coming over, and I was, you don't know the half of it, sir.
Well, thank you both, and congratulations on your successes as authors and also as faculty members at our partner colleges. We really appreciate you.
Thank you, really appreciate it.
Erin, we have the fall seminar in Austin next week for anyone that is able to join us. If not for the whole event, we're having the reception at 4:30 on Thursday. And all of you should have the information or contact us, and we can give that to you. We would love to see you there. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.
Thank you.